for earache, in particular when they were opening and closing their jaw. And they've had this blockage for a while. They had a friend that came to see me a few weeks ago. In fact, it was last week, and their friend recommended that they also book an appointment with myself. The patient's got a very narrow ear canal entrance, and you can see there's not much space there. I've got a full-size Zollner suction probe, and this is actually keratins, it's not earwax. You can, I could tell almost immediately because it's got a glossy appearance to it, but also when you've got keratin like this, it can be a bit stodgy. I think that's the best way I can describe it. So I've put some drops in straight away to see if this helps change the consistency. Now, as I was lifting this plug of keratin off the base of the ear canal, I could sense actually this was a bit more severe, and indeed it ended up being a grade 2, possibly grade 3 keratosis obturans. So I know a lot of you have probably been watching my channel for a while and you know what keratosis obturans is, but for those new viewers, I'll just explain what keratosis obturans is. Now, the ear canal and the outermost layer of the eardrum, what we call the lateral layer. So the eardrum's got 3 membranes. The outer layer that's facing us towards the ear canal entrance, that and the ear canal is lined by a layer of epithelial skin cells. So epithelial skin is the outermost layer of skin, and you can get endothelium. And the ear has evolved over millennia to self-cleanse all the dead skin. So we got obviously skin all over our body, and if you've got dead skin on your arm, and as long as that skin dies and sheds and you've got another layer of skin underneath it, that skin will just fall onto the floor. In your ear, however, if the skin just dies and collects in your ears, everyone's ears would be blocked full of dead skin. So the ear has evolved in a way that as that skin dies and sheds, it moves sideways out of the ear like a conveyor belt. And you've got another layer of skin underneath, that dies, that sheds, that moves sideways, and then you've got another layer of skin underneath. So it's a continuous cycle where the ear expels its skin naturally, and it's replacing it with a new layer of skin. Now that should happen for everyone, but in a small percentage of people, this skin doesn't migrate, and instead it collects into the ear canal, and then it forms into a keratin plug. So keratin is a protein that's found in dying dead skin cells, and it actually, as it oxidizes, it has this yellowy appearance. You can see underneath there where the bottom of the plug, the skin is a fresh layer of skin, so it's quite white in appearance. And then as we go to the core, it gets darker and darker and darker, and it's the oxidization process. So once this skin forms into a plug, this plug's got nowhere to go. And it's almost like a rubber ball. This plug gets bigger, bigger, bigger. It expands, it gets bigger into the ear, to the point where it actually widens and expands the ear canal, the bony part. And once it has, that's more often than not a permanent expansion, which then makes the ear more prone to collecting dead skin, because as skin's migrating out, it gets trapped in this expansion. It's almost like a cave. And quite early on, I realised that this is keratosis obturans. Now, you can see there's a bit of bleeding there, and that's nothing that we've done. We've not cut the ear or grazed the ear. Quite often with keratosis obturans, you can see the skin layer underneath. When you lift it, it's called contact bleeding. You remove the skin, which is strongly adhered. As soon as I lift it up with the suction probe and I let go, it just kind of almost flaps back into its original position. So when you lift the skin off the ear canal wall with these strong adhesions, you get blistering, you get a bit of bleeding there. And what I'm trying to do is this is just near the entrance. You can see the ear canal goes down, and this plug, there's a big cavity. If you watch till the end, you'll see, once I've removed this plug, which I ended up managing to do, thankfully, you'll have you'll see the anatomy of the ear, and you'll see this big opening and widening of the ear canal. So keratosis obturans, it's one of the most tricky, difficult things to remove. If you look on my channel, I've got a whole playlist of keratosis obturans. They're the lengthiest procedures. And what I'm doing here, I've used a combination of suction, ear hook, and I'm just trying to get underneath the plug. I'm just going to glide the jobs on underneath. But soon as I lift it up, it almost springs back into it just springs back into its original position, almost like a trapdoor. You open the trapdoor and it just flings itself back. So keratin, I feel again, I don't think it's, I was never researched it, but for me, it's got a lot of kinetic energy. So it can be quite springy and bouncy, and because you've got coils of skin, that coiling itself, the action of the coils, like dead skin, it comes in coils and ribbons. It looks almost like a DNA helix, and I suspect because of the structure of that, for that reason it has a lot of kinetic energy. So I'm just using a hook now, just trying to remove it, but the hook itself is just slicing through like a hot knife through butter. So it is becoming quite challenging. Patient at this stage is experiencing no pain. So I'm just trying to get the hook underneath again. And because the patient's got a very narrow ear canal entrance, it just makes it a bit more tricky, manoeuvrability of the instrumentation in the ear. But I've managed to get the hook underneath, and I'm turning the hook now. And you can see I'm lifting this plug up now. You can see the canal wall now at the bottom. So I am managing to loosen this plug. Now this skin, this undercoat of skin, that white layer, the best way to think about it is comparing it to double-sided sticky tape. So that skin, that white skin, not only attaches itself to the canal wall, but it attaches itself to the underneath of the skin plug, so it envelopes itself around. When I was explaining this to the patient of how tricky it can be to remove keratosis obturans, I was using the metaphor that it's a bit, analogy that it's similar to chewing gum. If you've got some chewing gum that's dried and it's on your clothing, for example, and you're trying to remove it and it's just strongly adhered, and you have to put a lot of pressure in there. So I think sometimes with that you freeze it, don't you? I think chewing gum, and you almost you freeze it, and then you then can peel it off. But of course we can't do that in the ear. I think one of the questions previously were, is it possible to freeze the wax or keratin in the ear? Now, if you do, obviously, if you think, I think someone asked whether you can use liquid nitrogen. In the ear is very sensitive to temperature change, because the organ of balance is deep in the ear, in the inner ear, and if you decrease the temperature, it inhibits the organ of balance, and if you increase the temperature, it excites the balance organ. So whether you increase or decrease the temperature of the ear, you are tricking your brain, almost fooling your brain into thinking it's moving, and you get the caloric effect, and that creates vertigo. So for that reason, the answer would probably be no, you couldn't use that. I know they sometimes freeze if you've got a skin tag, which then facilitates the removal of it. But I've never heard it being done in the ear before. So I've just put some sodium bicarbonate drops in there, really dosed the ear. Sodium bicarbonate works much, much better than olive oil, which is what I generally use when it comes to keratin. It has a better effect. But this plug is just too dense. It's been there for too long, and I actually soaked it for about 5-6 minutes, but it's had minimal effect. The surface of it's dampened a bit, it's loosened a bit, but the core of it hasn't. So I'm just using some forceps and trying to get underneath, but at this stage anyway, the forceps was just cutting it. You can see it's just cutting into this keratin plug. Instead of gripping it, being able to grip it and remove it, it's just dicing through. But nonetheless, I do continue to use the forceps, and if you watch till the end, the way I actually end up removing this is using some Henkel forceps, which are much, much larger, and I could just about fit the Henkel forceps into the ear canal, because as I mentioned, the ear canal entrance itself is very, very narrow. At the moment, I can't use the Henkel forceps. There's not enough there for me to grab onto. Now, you can see at the bottom, there's a bit of a gap there where I am with the forceps now. So with these forceps, the bottom jaw, there's enough space for me to get underneath that gap. And when you use forceps, you need to be able to get the jaws either side of the wax plug or the keratin plug, so you can get a grip. So when you then shut the forceps, you've got the crocodile teeth, the alligator teeth, that are on the jaws itself, which then grip onto the object so you can remove it. With the Henkel forceps, they're a completely different design. They're a lot thicker, and I wouldn't be able to glide that in at the moment. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes trying to lift this up to give myself a bit of space. So I kind of know this is not going to come out with suction, but nonetheless, we're now almost preparing the ear. We tried with the suction, we tried with the ear hook, I tried with the Jobson horn. You saw that in the first parts of the procedure. I'm using the normal forceps, but it's just not, those forceps, the surface area, it's not wide enough, not big enough to get a firm enough grip here. And I'm just priming the ear now, getting it ready for the Henkel forceps. So I'm just trying to peel back as much of this keratin off the canal wall. But again, there's so much kinetic energy here. We're in the ear, we have to put a lot of force just to lift this away. Because every time I do, it just wants to spring back into its original position. The patient did experience a bit of discomfort, I think, more or less at this stage. And as I said, they had a bit of pain when they came in. This is one of those procedures I would really love to be able to use some local anaesthetic just to numb the ear. I did advise the patient sometimes in extreme cases like this that these clugs, I've known some that have had to be done under GA, under general anaesthetic, but sometimes under local anaesthetic. But I explained to the patient I wasn't able to do that myself, but they wanted me to continue. I was happy to continue because I just felt I would be able to remove this. I've removed enough keratosis obturans in the last few years where I feel a lot more comfortable now, a lot more confident. I know the bit of tricks of the trade, and that's all that's very useful when you've got experience of doing things before. You know the process. So if you watch some of the keratosis obturans videos, they're not short videos. Very seldom are they short. They are, I think some of them are 30 to 45 minutes. So again, I was preparing the patient. So look, this can take a while because there is a process involved. It's not straightforward, and the patient completely understood that. So again, I'm just trying to lift this upwards. You can see this keratin at the bottom, just how strongly adhered it is. Really trying to, with the suction pad, pull this away, elevate it off the canal wall, but it's just so tough. Now this plug that I'm eventually going to remove, it was probably double the size of the patient's entrance. You can imagine when I was extracting it and pulling it out the ear, it was very, very difficult. And here comes the forceps. I think I might have edited a bit out because I went in before, but he didn't miss much. I think I probably went in and it got a bit misty, so I've just come back out. So you can see this is the big guns now when we're getting out the Henkel forceps, and it's almost cup shaped, oval shaped either side, and I'm just about getting in. And at first I was like, okay, it's just tearing it, it's not coming forwards, but I just wanted to continue, and thankfully I did, because eventually it did come out. So you can see just the size of the jaw, the bottom jaw, the jaws are so much thicker. So I need that space. I can't graze this against the canal wall. It's going to be very, very uncomfortable. So hence why I was lifting this plug up so I can get the bottom jaw underneath. And also to the left-hand side, I've managed to pull this away from the anterior canal wall so I can glide the top jaw behind that. And now I can feel it. I'm getting a bit of grip, a bit of purchase. And to get access, I've had to stretch the patient's ear. As I said, they've got a very small ear. And you can see I've got a grip, and I'm just little wriggles, just trying to detach the more distal end. Because this plug, in the end, it was almost 2.5 centimetres, which is almost the average length of the ear canal. So it extends all the way towards the eardrum. And although I was able to lift the skin off and peel the skin off the more lateral part of the ear canal, it was still attached more medially towards the eardrum. So these little wriggle motions is trying to, as I'm pulling, I'm wriggling it so it detaches itself more medially towards the eardrum. So it's coming out slowly but surely now. And the patient was shocked when they saw this plug. They were absolutely gobsmacked by the size of it. It's almost there. Sometimes we joke with the patients, and I kind of explain to it, it's almost like we're giving birth to this plug, and I can see the head. It's just to give it a little light humour, because it was a kind of a long procedure for the patient, and just to relax them. And you can just see the size of these Henkel forceps. They're huge. It's not often I use them, it's not often I have to use them. And you can see the the furthest part of the plug here, all that keratin, dead skin. And if you watch till the end, you're going to see really, really clear still images. I've put it beside a ruler as well. So just going back in to some debris here, some keratin. So this is not wax, it was pure dead skin, keratin subterans, plug of dead skin. You can see the widening now, and that it gives you appreciation. You go to that first bend, and you'll have more of an opportunity to see it at the moment. Just mopping up some keratin off the roof of the ear canal. And you can just see how narrow this ear is, got in the endoscope pin, and the ear canal suddenly goes down, it's a big trench. Now that's the eardrum there. Now, it just looks a bit abnormal. Obviously the ear is very sore and tender because we pulled this plug out. I'm going to just peel some of this keratin off now. The eardrum doesn't look normal, so I asked the patient, we asked them before as well, if they had any previous surgery, operations or childhood infections, and they did suffer from a lot of childhood infections. So you probably saw there to the left, the eardrum it's with the suction probe, the eardrum's flexing. So there's a thinning of the eardrum there, so it's very likely that this patient had a perforated eardrum in the past, and it's healed. And so the eardrum's made up of 3 membranes. As I explained earlier, the lateral membrane, the one facing us, is the same skin that lines the ear canal. The innermost membrane is the mucosa, which forms a part of the middle ear. You can see I'm just peeling this keratin off the eardrum. The middle layer is the fibrous connective tissue layer. When you've got a perforation, sometimes it's only the outer epithelial layer and the inner mucosa layer that heals. So that part of the eardrum is missing the fibrous connective tissue. That's what gives the eardrum its rigidity, which makes the eardrum very flaccid, very, very, very thin. And I did tympanometry, did a pressure test, and it does show that this eardrum is very hypercompliant. And you can see the anatomy there, how widened the ear canal is. That's that plug of keratin, so it's a big one. As I said, the average length of the ear canal is about 2.6 to 2.8 centimetres. That was coming up to 2.4